Now why for this life, oh, now so palava. I tire for this problem, I tire for life, oh. Guinea, no work, no food, no house, no life. This small water, then they bring us so dirty, they pull them. This small money, I they get now so transport, they chop them. School low, na headache, hospital, no work. I tire for life, oh. My brother, waiting you they think, oh. My sister, help don't come. SDP, MKO, Jingle, action. MKO, Jingle, SDP, progress. Abiola na the hope, SDP na the party to solve our problem and better our life, oh. MKO, 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 action. Abiola, 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 progress. Now he be the hope for better tomorrow.
I watched that live on television then, whether it was black and white or some color television or some television with some tripod. We watched it live. Now, we still have Kola with us here in the studios, and perhaps tell us your participation in the making of this jingle.
Oh, yes. It was a three-part campaign, media campaign. Got so good I have Mr. Femi Rede here, who's head of that. What I did was to put out a brief to 5 different agencies. One is actually an agency of my very close friend of mine, Larry Adisa. And I said, well, Larry, this is what we want to do. Write the brief, but it's going to be competitive. So we put out the brief to 5 different agencies. They all came to pitch. And as God would have it, Rosabel Chief Odusi won the day. And everybody left feeling fully satisfied that it was a very transparent process. So what we did was we had a campaign for the pre-delegation election in Jos, which was just an advert highlighting the qualities of the candidate on the one hand. And then once we scaled Jos, we had the other jingle, the one before this you played, going out. And then once Baba Kingibe was picked as VP, then we had the one that you played now. Oh. So that was a sequence. And it was based on a lot of data. It was because we did a lot of data crunching and sampling and surveys and things like that. And that's how come we came up with that. It's a classic. It's one of the it's one of the biggest things I've heard about at that election, and it goes to show what. And also another thing we did was to make sure everything was homegrown. We had an agency from America, I think it was, who tried to pitch, and I'm like, what would you know about politics in Nigeria?
So back in the day, even some of those agencies actually pitched for this.
Yeah, from America. They came, they pitched.
And Roosevelt got this.
Yeah, and I told them, you know, it's going to be strictly a pitch by indigenous advertising companies or media companies, because I believed we understood and we know what we're looking for. And Roosevelt won the day, hands down, and Chief Odusi has been the biggest Egmo I've ever had in a long time till to date. So that was it.
You know, I said this part, our closing moment, I'm going to be asking some of those pressing questions. Please. And Concorde Airline.
Right.
I read newspapers a lot as a child. That's when I fell in love with Mike Awoyinfa, Dingba Igwe, and a lot of other people.
Yeah.
And,
Concorde.
Yes, in Concorde.
Yeah.
What has happened to Dad's dynasty, his business empire? I woke up someday and I didn't find any.
Yeah, I explained a few days back at Channels. MKO started very humble beginnings. I can remember I was going to Lagos State Staff School. My mother was teaching textile design at Yaba Tech. We would always walk from school to join her at Yaba Tech before we go home. So that's kind of, so contrary to the stereotype, we did a lot of crawling before we started running, okay? Now, from over time, things got better, and as it got better, he added added to get to this empire you're talking about. Now, politics is a winner-take-all game in Nigeria. They fight you physically. He was incarcerated. I was equally locked up for a period of almost 6 months. They fight you economically.
You know, a lot of people didn't know about that.
Yeah. They fight you economically. And they believe by fighting you economically, you won't have the resource to fight back. And it's for good reason, which I'll get to with time. All those companies were built over a span of a period. But when you fight government, they can shut you down immediately. And they shut down everything, even the planes, Concord Airlines. We try to ferry them out, but they refuse to even give a license to ferry them out because they believe that you ferry them out, you either run them or sell, or sell them. So everything rotted on ground, for example.
You mean the government of the day did that?
Oh, yeah. They took away all the contracts he had. There was a circular actually out by the Abacha government that all our payments should not be made and all our contracts should be cancelled, including our oil license. It took a lot of ingenuity to keep it going back then. So everything came crashing. The paper was proscribed. Everything came crashing. And like I've said also, no matter how beautiful the China is, it takes 1 second to smash it. Once you drop it, it's gone. And it's a painstaking exercise to begin to piece it together. And you'll still have some fragments that will never be able to fit in again. And that's where we are with the business. I've succeeded in being able to keep what I think is relevant. And
which is?
Really, well, there are a few of them. There's the Summit Oil, for example. And the whole idea there is to keep them relevant enough to be able to help grow the family. That's the objective. So it's been that kind of exercise that we had to do. We had to keep our heads down. I even registered a company on my own at some point, which I couldn't run because I was hoping that I wouldn't even start running it till my father comes and we had a discussion. My principle was never to get into anything involved with the family. So if I'm going to do any business, I can't be in the same business with the family or the same business my father did. But at some point in this exercise, I felt, look, we can't just have all eggs in one basket. And I registered that company, but I was going to wait for him to come home and have that discussion. Unfortunately, he never came home to have that discussion. But so this is how it is. They fight you dirty in any which way you can, and in doing so, they think they hurt us the most, but no, they've hurt the public the most. At the height of it, the Abiola group was the highest private sector employer in this country. We had offices in every state in this country. Now, you can imagine by supposedly crushing us, what that does to all their families and the secondary effects of that, and all that benefit from that. There's a whole local government in Taraba, for example, where the farm was, that we fixed their roads, we gave them power, we gave them everything. The minute they shut us down, they went back to pre-rural times again. Even the local government there is even named after me just because of the kind of activity we created in that place. And it's rather unfortunate. Like my father would say, you can't cut off the nose to spite the face. you're going to disfigure everything invariably. So that's what they did back then. And fact is that some will come back. Fact is that not all will come back, but the ones that come back will add value going forward, and that's the principle we adopted.
You know, for some, they were in this struggle with you, especially those in Nadeco, Afenifere, and was it YCE? I think they were also part of the struggle, and a couple of other people. But the question is, what's your relationship like with these people who were out for the struggle? How has it been like?
For me, The biggest problem I had, even from the Hope 93 days, is that I'm an outsider. And I'm not a politician. My father's song quite all right, but I think I've earned the. I think I earned the confidence that he reposed in my ability to get things done. So I try not to. I try to be neutral to all the groups for effectiveness. Okay, now. In so doing, because one of them we will have meetings and they will say, what does Kola know about politics? It's not the kind of, I'm able to look at these things wholly objectively. I don't have, objectively, I don't have a commitment. The commitment I had was to deliver the ticket. First and foremost, over and above everything else. Not for me, but the ticket. And that's what I focus on fully. And as time goes on, because I was working from the inside, I could see a lot of things a lot of everybody out there did not see. And I question the sincerity of all of these peoples. And as such, if I know I'm too direct and too straight with the way I do things, if I know otherwise, there's no way I can deal. It just doesn't. And that's one thing I wish I took from my father that I did, unfortunately. I just can't act like I don't know. So once I see all the antecedents and I know them from the past and I know where they're going with things, I just go out quietly and do my thing and go and work it. And that's one of the reasons I got, besides, it's like all the strikes after the elections. I virtually organized that whole thing back then. So, but I can't be loud about those things then, and I have to be sensible about how I conduct it at the same time. And not, because if one of us is, for example, when General Ambassador's incarceration, I was on the list of those to be arrested. I had a friend who is retired from the army now, came to give me a heads up and said, look, you have to take off. And I'm like, look, let them catch me in the house, because if I take off, he cannot be incarcerated and I'm out. So who's there left to continue to do things?
Was there a time you told Dad to abandon his mandate?
Yes, I've had that a lot. I even got one of the Fenifero or Adeco guys accused me of taking contracts in Abuja. That's probably why I did. And I told him, well, it's a matter of contracts. It's Nigeria, but I never for once took any contracts. I didn't. They will claim that because I don't make the noise. They're doing it for the wrong reasons. Unfortunately, they're doing it for the wrong reasons. These guys never wanted MKO in the first place to get as far as it did. But what we succeeded in doing with our campaign is to take the rank and file off them. They couldn't say otherwise because they're going to be dealt with publicly. They're going to be lynched publicly. And we saw a lot of that after my father passed away when they came visiting. And the students were revolting and trying to beat them up. I had to even step in on their behalf to keep them from mishandled. So I saw through all that because I was involved in it and I could look at things very objectively. And I wasn't ready to, I figured, look, I have to do this thing for us. And the method, the means and ways in which they were about to go about it will never get us anywhere. And that was my case. Now, does that mean I'm about to tell him to jump ship? No. When he left for England, unannounced.
You also said you asked him to go to London.
No, I didn't even know. I was walking out in the gym.
Because the news then was that
I was walking out in the gym.
Kola asked him to go to London, and when he went to London, I think the struggle, dipped.
Yeah,
because a lot of people felt that he abandoned the struggle.
I was at the gym. My brother, Deji, called me and said, well, Dad is heading for the airport. Come and do something. So I left the gym, ran to the house, got to the house he had left. I got to the airport, the plane had taken off. So what I just did is that I went back home, changed, and got on the next BA flight to London. And I went to meet him in London. I said, sir, you can't leave. You can't leave. By leaving, we're throwing the initiative back to the government. You cannot leave. We have to be back home. He said he was on his way to America, that I should join him. I said, no, both of us cannot be out. So he says, well, if I go back home, they will arrest me. I said, I hope they arrest me because at least that will put the issue back on the burner.
On the border.
And the following day, I saw him to the airport. He left for America. And I turned back and came back home. Fortunately, unfortunately, nothing happened at immigrations. And I walked back in. I came back immediately the following day. I refused to go to America with him. And like I suspected, the only sanctions, that were imposed immediately after the annulment are the only things that were still existing by the time he came back to Nigeria. The conspiracy against MKO was total. Even to the point that even Abacha himself would say then, I don't know if you recall, that he doesn't quite understand what's going on here, but for holding him back in detention has nothing to do with them. When we went to court, we filed for, and that's another thing, and that's another thing when they will say what they say, because I never went to court for one day.
Oh.
Why? Because I told my father that I don't believe in JOK Ajayi.